Imagine a country in the heart of Europe, surrounded by Christian nations, shaped by centuries of Western history, where the call to prayer echoes through the mountains every single day, where mosques stand next to Catholic churches, where people drink coffee slowly, sit with strangers, and greet each other with words that trace back to Arabia. This is not the Middle East. This is Bosnia. And the story of how Islam arrived here, survived here, and quietly transformed everything, from the food you eat to the way people think about death, is one of the most fascinating stories you've never been told. Stay with me, because this one is going to surprise you. Bosnia and Herzegovina. Most people outside Europe only heard this name during the 1990s, during the war, during the tragedy. But Bosnia's story goes back much, much further, and it is far richer and stranger than war footage ever showed you. Today, roughly half of Bosnia's population identifies as Muslim. They call themselves Bosniaks. And here's the thing that confuses people the most: these are not immigrants. These are not people whose grandparents moved from Turkey or Egypt or Saudi Arabia. These are indigenous European Muslims. People whose families have lived in these mountains and valleys for over 500 years. Their Islam did not come by boat across an ocean. It came through history, politics, and a decision made centuries ago that changed everything. So how did this happen? How did a Slavic people in the middle of Europe become Muslim, and stay Muslim, through wars, empires, communism, and genocide? And what exactly did Islam change about Bosnian culture, architecture, food, and daily life in ways most people never notice? Let's go back to the beginning. Part 1. The Ottoman Arrival. The year is 1463. The Ottoman Empire, one of the most powerful forces the world had ever seen, conquers the Kingdom of Bosnia. This was not a small moment. This was the end of medieval Bosnia and the beginning of something entirely new. Now, here is something important to understand. The Ottomans were not in the habit of forcing everyone they conquered to become Muslim. That is actually a myth that gets repeated a lot. Christians and Jews in the Ottoman Empire were allowed to practice their religions. They paid extra taxes. They had certain restrictions. But they were not mass converted at sword point. So why did so many Bosnians convert to Islam? Historians have debated this for over a century. And the answer is probably not one single reason. It was many reasons layered on top of each other. First, Bosnia before the Ottomans was already a religiously complicated place. There was a unique Bosnian church, a local Christian institution that was considered heretical by both Rome and Constantinople. This church had weakened Bosnian Christianity. So when the Ottomans arrived, Islam did not have to fight a deeply rooted, unified Christian identity. The ground was already unstable. Second, converting to Islam meant real, practical benefits. You could own land more freely. You could rise in the Ottoman military and government. You could avoid paying the extra tax on non-Muslims. For the Bosnian nobility especially, conversion was a path to power. And many of them took it. Third, and this is the part that surprises most people, some Bosnians genuinely found Islam compelling. The Sufi orders that came with the Ottomans were not rigid and harsh. They were mystical, poetic, open. They built lodges called teks where people gathered for music and spiritual practice. For communities searching for something meaningful, this had real appeal. So over time, conversion spread. Not overnight. Not by force. But slowly, across generations, a significant portion of Bosnians became Muslim, and they stayed that way even as the Ottoman Empire eventually collapsed around them. Part 2. Architecture and the Built World. When Islam came to Bosnia, it did not just change what people believed. It changed what they built. Walk through Sarajevo's old city, the Baskarsaja, and you are walking through a landscape that is essentially Ottoman Islamic architecture, preserved in the middle of Europe. The Hans, the covered bazaars, the fountains called ezem, the narrow winding streets, all of this comes directly from Ottoman city planning, which was itself deeply shaped by Islamic principles about public space, community, and water. Water, by the way, is a big deal in Islamic urban design. Ritual cleanliness, called wudu, requires washing before prayer. So every mosque had a fountain outside it. But the Ottomans went further. They built public fountains throughout Bosnian cities so that clean water was available to everyone, regardless of religion. This was not just infrastructure. It was an expression of a religious value, that water is a blessing, and blessings should be shared. Mosques themselves are another story worth telling. Bosnia has some genuinely beautiful mosques that blend Ottoman craftsmanship with local Bosnian materials and style. The Gazi Huzrev Beg Mosque in Sarajevo, built in 1531, is considered one of the finest examples of Ottoman architecture in the entire Balkans. But you also find smaller, simpler mosques in mountain villages, built from local stone, with wooden interiors, that feel distinctly Bosnian. Islam did not erase Bosnian identity. It absorbed it, mixed with it, created something new. And then there are the minarets. That tall, thin tower you see rising above Bosnian towns? The minaret's job is to carry the call to prayer, the adhan, 5 times a day. When you hear that sound in Bosnia, you are hearing something that has been heard in those valleys since the 1400s. 500 years of the same call, echoing off the same mountains. That is not a small thing. Beyond mosques, Islam shaped how Bosnians designed their homes. The traditional Bosnian house, called a divanhana or sometimes just a Bosnian house, was designed with privacy in mind. Interior courtyards, screened windows, separate spaces for women and men when guests came. These design principles came directly from Islamic ideas about modesty and the separation of public and private life. You can still see remnants of this architecture in places like Mostar, in houses that are hundreds of years old. Part 3: Food. Now let's talk about something everyone loves: food. Bosnian cuisine is one of the most underrated food cultures in Europe. And Islam shaped it in ways that go much deeper than just the absence of pork, although that is part of it. Bosnian Muslims follow halal dietary rules. That means no pork, no alcohol in cooking, and meat slaughtered in a specific way. But this restriction did not make Bosnian food bland or limited. It pushed cooks toward extraordinary creativity with lamb, beef, vegetables, and spices. Take savapi, the small, skinless sausages made from minced beef and lamb that are basically Bosnia's national food. They are served in a flatbread called soman, with raw onion and a creamy cheese called kajmak. Simple, perfect, deeply satisfying. This dish has roots in Ottoman culinary traditions, which themselves were influenced by Central Asian and Middle Eastern cooking. Then there is burek, a flaky, layered pastry filled with meat, or cheese, or spinach. Burek came to Bosnia through the Ottomans and spread across the entire Balkans. But Bosnians will tell you, politely but firmly, that their burek is the best. In Sarajevo, you can still find burek zinikas, small shops that make burek fresh every morning, that have been operating since the Ottoman era. Tarhana soup. Dolma, vegetables stuffed with spiced rice and meat. Baklava made with walnuts and rose water. Tufahija, a whole apple poached in sugar syrup and stuffed with walnuts and cream. Every one of these dishes tells a story about the meeting of Slavic, Ottoman, and Islamic culinary traditions. And coffee. Oh, the coffee. Bosnian coffee is not like any coffee you've had from a machine. It is prepared in a small copper pot called a dzezva. Finely ground coffee is boiled directly in water, then poured into a tiny cup called a filzen, where the grounds settle at the bottom. You drink it slowly. You sit. You talk. Or you sit in silence and think. This ritual of coffee drinking, the slowness of it, the deliberateness, reflects something deeply embedded in Bosnian Islamic culture. The idea that rest, conversation, and the present moment have value. That you do not have to be productive every second. Part 4. Language, Art, and Poetry. Language is where things get really interesting. The Bosnian language is a South Slavic language, close to Serbian and Croatian. But walk through its vocabulary and you will find Arabic and Turkish words hiding everywhere, imported across 5 centuries of Ottoman Islamic culture. The word sevda, which describes a particular kind of deep, melancholic longing, comes from the Arabic word sada, related to the idea of melancholy. It gave its name to Sevdalinka, Bosnia's most beloved traditional music. These are slow, aching love songs, often about lost love, longing, or the beauty of a city. They are considered one of the great musical traditions of Europe, and their soul comes partly from the Ottoman musical traditions that arrived with Islam. Arabic phrases are embedded in everyday Bosnian speech. When someone leaves your house, you might say masala, meaning what God has willed, as a blessing. When something good happens, inshallah, if God wills. When someone dies, The phrase Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, we belong to God and to Him we return, is spoken. These are Arabic phrases from the Quran, and Bosnian Muslims say them so naturally they barely notice anymore. They are just part of the language of feeling. Islamic art, with its tradition of geometric patterns and calligraphy, also left a mark on Bosnian visual culture. Because Islam traditionally discourages the depiction of human figures in religious art, Bosnian Islamic artistic energy went into pattern, geometry, and the beauty of writing. You see this in mosque interiors, intricate tile work, carved wooden ceilings, Arabic calligraphy on walls. It is a different kind of beauty than European Christian art. Quieter, more mathematical, but no less profound. Part 5. Death, Memory, and the Steci. Here is one of the most unexpected intersections of Islam and Bosnian identity, the relationship with death and memory. Before the Ottomans arrived, medieval Bosnia had a remarkable tradition of monumental tombstones called steci. These are massive stone monuments, sometimes carved with mysterious symbols, spirals, suns, deer, human figures, found across the Bosnian landscape. Nobody fully understands all of their symbolism. They predate Islamic Bosnia. But here is the fascinating thing. When Bosnians converted to Islam, they did not abandon the tradition of marking death with beautiful, significant monuments. They adapted it. Bosnian Muslim graveyards, called mezarljusi, became places of distinctive artistic expression. The tombstones, called nisans, have their own elegant shape, tall, narrow, often carved with geometric Islamic patterns and Arabic calligraphy. In some Bosnian graveyards, these nisans stand in rows across hillsides, creating a landscape that is quietly breathtaking. This continuity, from steci to nisan, tells you something important about how Islam was absorbed in Bosnia. It did not erase what came before. It transformed it. Bosnian identity and Islamic identity became inseparable, but the Bosnian part never disappeared. And in the 1990s, during the Bosnian War, this was precisely what made the genocide so horrifying. The Srebrenica massacre targeted Bosniak Muslim men and boys specifically because of their religious ethnic identity. Mosques were destroyed. Graveyards were desecrated. The goal was not just to kill people, it was to erase 500 years of a living Islamic civilization from European soil. The fact that Bosnian Islam survived, that the mosques were rebuilt, that the call to prayer still echoes through Sarajevo, is not a small thing. It is an act of cultural and spiritual endurance that deserves far more recognition than it gets. Part 6. Bosnian Islam Today. What does Bosnian Islam look like today? It is something that often surprises visitors from the Muslim world and the Western world equally. Bosnian Muslims are generally moderate, deeply European in their cultural habits, and quietly devout in ways that do not always look like what people expect. You will find women in hijab walking next to women in miniskirts in Sarajevo. You will find Bosnian Muslims who pray 5 times a day and Bosnian Muslims who rarely pray at all but still feel deeply, culturally Muslim. You will find young Bosniak men who drink beer at a cafe and still fast during Ramadan, because Ramadan is not just religious practice, it is family tradition, community, memory. This is not contradiction. This is the texture of a living culture. Islam in Bosnia has always been shaped by local conditions. It absorbed Bosnian coffee culture, Bosnian music, Bosnian hospitality. It did not arrive as a rigid imported ideology, it grew up here, adapted here, became Bosnian. That said, Bosnia is not without tension. After the war, some outside influences, particularly more conservative interpretations of Islam from Gulf countries, attempted to gain footing in Bosnia. Most Bosnian Muslims pushed back. The Islamic community of Bosnia-Herzegovina, which represents the country's Muslims, actively promotes what it calls the Bosnian tradition of Islam, one that is European, moderate, rooted in Sufi-influenced tolerance. It is a tradition worth knowing about. In a world that often talks about Islam in terms of conflict and extremism, Bosnia offers a different story, one of centuries-long coexistence, quiet endurance, and cultural creativity. So here is what Bosnia teaches us, if we are willing to listen. A religion can travel thousands of miles and take root in completely unexpected soil, and when it does not simply replace what was there. It mixes. It transforms. It becomes something new that is neither purely what it was nor purely what it found. Bosnian Islam is Ottoman and Slavic, Arabic and European, ancient and stubbornly alive. The mosques rising above the mountain valleys. The smell of burek in the morning. The slow ritual of coffee and conversation. The Sevdalinka songs that carry centuries of longing in every note. The Nissans standing in rows across hillside graveyards. These are not separate things. They are one story. The story of how a faith and a people grew into each other over 500 years and created a civilization that survived empires, communism, and genocide. Bosnia is not a simple place. But it is a beautiful and important one. And its Islamic heritage is not a foreign element grafted onto European history. It is a core part of what Europe actually is. Next time someone tells you Islam has no place in Europe, tell them to go to Sarajevo on a Friday afternoon. Stand in the old city. Listen to the Adhan rise over the rooftops. Then ask yourself, does this sound like something that doesn't belong? If this video made you think, made you curious, or made you want to book a flight to Sarajevo, honestly, same, then please hit that like button right now. It helps more people find this story, and this story deserves to be found. Drop a comment below and tell me, what surprised you most? Was it the food? The architecture? The language? I read every single comment, and I would genuinely love to know. Share this video with someone who loves history, travel, or untold stories, because Bosnia is one of the most underrated places in the world, and the more people who know about it, the better. And if you are new here, welcome. We do this kind of deep, curious, honest history storytelling every week. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss one. I'll see you in the next